This is a how-to video for the Coolboxx 2. I'll show you how to wire the watchdog in this Coolboxx 2. I'm not sure if you can see it clearly. It's based off an ESP32 microcontroller. It supports up to 16 amps of power provided by this one PCIe 6-pin header, and it has phone fan headers. There's some connectors for external temperature sensors that you can use, which is the J1, the J2 and the J3. The J1 is actually a watchdog. Plug in this to your reset switch header on the motherboard. If the Coolboxx stops getting signal from the motherboard itself, in which case the rig will be frozen, and then what it'll do is it'll wait for the watchdog timeout to expire, and then it'll actually hard reset the motherboard. I will put this on here, and then we have a top that you can place on this, but in a closed server case it can stay like this if you somehow mount it onto the bottom. At this moment I'm just using a tape on top of this. So what I'll do is I'll just go through the wiring. I have removed the PSU, which actually sits in this place. The location of the fan, this is also a very good place here. That's another space that it can go very easily, because there's usually nothing here, or here somewhere on the sides of the fans it can go. If there's enough space here, usually it's a little bit tough here, because then the cables usually interfere with the case on top, but your case may be different, so you can actually put it here. For me it is here. This is a good place, because then there's no chance of it being in the way of anything, because it can just sit underneath the GPU. So if I plug in a GPU on top of this, which should be right here, it can easily clear that. So it can further go down that way, but it can also come this way. So here the thing to notice is with the reset pin, there's a reset and there's a ground. So make sure you keep the polarities straight, otherwise it might not work. Use a DuPont cable like this. That's the reset, this is the ground. So I'm going to use the black for the ground and plug it like this. On this specific motherboard, it's this polarity, so the plus is on, so that's those are the two reset pins. So if you plug it in like this, that will work. So what this will do is it will reset the rig if the fan controller loses communication with the motherboard. How is that communication happening? That communication is happening through this USB cable. This is the USB cable. You plug in one side of it into the fan controller and the other side into a USB outlet. If you want to see, the cable is actually plugged in here. I'll install the power supply, but I'll pause the video. What I've done here is now I have plugged in all of these front panel IOs along with the reset DuPont jump lead from Coolboxx to the motherboard, and now I will install the power supply. But one thing to note is I have not put in the reset button from the front IO, because that's where the Coolboxx is plugged in. Next, what I will do is I will put the top of this, I'll remove this and put the top of the case onto Coolboxx and just tape it, and it stays without even moving. And I'll plug in this again, so the cable goes this way and it's properly plugged in. This specific power supply comes in with a 6-pin header for a fan controller. Plug this in here. You can use any of the PCIe that, if you don't have this, then you can use any of the PCIe cables. There's out on the motherboard as well that you can use to plug this into there. I have done the cables. It's tucked underneath the fans, and it's fairly stable. It's not moving. This is also not moving. These cables plugged in. That's all what you need to do. So a few things: power, fans, hardware watchdog, and the USB on the side. This is a USB-C connector, but it's actually a USB. So if your motherboard has a header for USB, then you can get one of these cables, which is USB-C on one side and USB header, 9-pin USB header on the other side, and then you don't have to route this cable all the way to the USB ports, and everything can stay internally. But if you don't have that, you can always use a USB cable from the USB ports on the motherboard to the fan controller. So that's how it will work. I have now gone ahead and installed a GPU, and you can easily see that, and there's enough space between the fan controller and the GPU. I put it here because the fan controller has a thermal sensor, so that actually gives you the basically, when you're looking at that, it'll give you the air temperature that is going across this area. Now I have all the GPUs that I have here plugged in. This is now running MMPOS. So I have set the fan in MMPOS to 50% for manual fixed speed. We'll wait for the agent to kick in and then let the fan speed be slower. But with the 50% that I've set, once MMPOS agent does see, this is now at 50%. So the fans are now running at 50% because I've set it manually in the system to be running at 50%. You can set these this way. Once the full integration of MMPOS is completed, then at that point I think it should be much more consistent. With HiOS you won't see any of these issues, or with RaveOS as well, it will work perfectly fine. You now know how to wire this up and how it will work, and we will chat on another video if there was a need for any update on the controller itself.